Your coding agent bill just came in, and Claude cost you 10 times more than MiniMax for the exact same work. At scale, that gap compounds every single month, and it's not something you can just absorb. Claude is built for peak reasoning quality. MiniMax is built for volume at a fraction of the price, and the real question is whether Claude's edge is actually worth paying for. Test 1. Cost efficiency. You're shipping a coding agent that fires off, say, 50 million output tokens a month. At Claude's list price of $15 per million output tokens, that's $750. Run the same workload on MiniMax at $1.20 per million, and you're looking at $60. And that gap compounds every single month. I pulled the vendor list prices directly. Claude Sonnet 4 is $3 per million input tokens and $15 per million output tokens. MiniMax M2 is 30 cents and $1.20. That's a 10 times gap on input and a 12.5 times gap on output. And when you divide SWE bench score by output price, MiniMax delivers roughly 11.7 times more coding performance per dollar spent. MiniMax takes cost efficiency, and I didn't expect the gap to be this clean at the list price level. That puts MiniMax up 1-0, and for high volume coding work, this is the number that decides everything before you even look at quality. I've been deep in these pricing docs long enough to know that the sticker shock hits hardest at scale, not in a quick demo. Drop a comment if your API bill has ever surprised you. Test 2. Coding benchmark. Okay, so the objection you probably already have is, sure, MiniMax is cheap, but does it actually solve real code problems? SWE Bench Verified is the closest thing we have to a real answer on that, because it uses actual GitHub issues, not toy prompts, and the score tells you how often a model ships a working fix without handholding. Claude Sonnet 4 scores 72.9% on SWE Bench Verified. MiniMax M2 scores 68.4%. That's a 4.5 point gap, which is real, and community hands-on use leans Claude for output that feels more natural and production-ready without the occasional over-engineering. Some users flag with MiniMax, though that's directional consensus, not a controlled test. Claude takes the coding benchmark, and the data backs it up with a measurable lead on real GitHub issues. One of the biggest problems I run into when using AI agents is turning their output into YouTube content I can actually use to market my product. That's why this video is sponsored by Subscriber, a tool that helps business owners connect their AI agents to YouTube and market their products without spending 10 hours every week creating content. You can connect Claude or ChatGPT directly to Subscriber. It then analyzes your business, website, and YouTube channel to help you create SEO-optimized video ideas, scripts, thumbnails, and even complete videos that actually match your brand. What I like most is that every week, Subscriber gives me a list of high-potential video ideas I can immediately execute, and it can even help edit videos for me, with or without my face, including videos like the one you're watching right now. It's easy to get started, and you can try Subscriber for free using the link in the description below. Now back to the video. That ties the score at 1-1, but keep in mind, you're paying 12.5 times more per output token for that 4.5 point edge. Test 3. Output speed. A coding agent running at 100 tokens per second finishes a typical code review task in a fraction of the time one running at 40 tokens per second does. And when you're chaining multiple agent calls in a pipeline, those wait times stack up fast and can turn a 30-second task into a 2-minute bottleneck that stalls everything downstream. Put the numbers up and it's pretty striking. MiniMax M2 claims 105 tokens per second from their own official figures. Claude's figure is 41 tokens per second from community reporting. So these aren't from the same test setup, and you should take the gap as directional, not a clean head-to-head. Even so, a real gap anywhere near that size makes MiniMax noticeably faster in practice. MiniMax takes speed on the directional evidence, because even a conservative real-world gap would make it meaningfully faster for high-volume pipelines. That puts MiniMax ahead 2-1, with one test still to score. So MiniMax is cheaper and faster, but context, window, and deployment reach are still on the board. And those two dimensions could genuinely change which one fits your specific stack. If you're running whole repo analysis or you're locked into Google Cloud, the next tests matter a lot more than the scoreboard right now suggests. Test 4. Context and output limits. You're feeding a model your entire monorepo, maybe 300,000 tokens of code and docs. Claude's 200,000 token context window cuts off before it even finishes reading the repo, so it starts hallucinating file paths and missing dependencies. And that's a real failure mode on large codebases that cost you debugging time you didn't budget for. I had to check this twice. MiniMax M2 handles a 1 million token context window, 5 times Claude's 200,000. Flip it around and Claude can emit 64,000 output tokens in a single response, double MiniMax 32,000. So you get a massive read advantage with MiniMax and a bigger write advantage with Claude. Context and output limits split clean down the middle, so this one's scored even, and the tally stays at Claude 2, MiniMax 2, with one test tied. Test 5, deployment and modality. Your team is already running infrastructure on Google Cloud, and your compliance team needs the model inside Vertex AI for data residency reasons. You pick the cheaper model, go to wire it up, and find out it's not available on Vertex at all, and that's not a minor inconvenience. That's a migration you didn't plan for. When I checked platform availability, Claude Sonnet 4 is on the Direct API, AWS Bedrock, and Google Vertex AI. MiniMax M2 is on the API and Bedrock, but not Vertex. Both models accept text and image inputs and return text output, so on modality, they're basically identical. But that Vertex gap is a hard blocker for Google Cloud teams. Now, Vertex AI is a minor edge for most teams, and for anyone outside Google Cloud, it genuinely doesn't matter. For teams that are on it, though, MiniMax simply isn't there yet, and that makes Claude the only real option for that infrastructure path right now. Claude takes deployment because Vertex AI support is a real, hard requirement for a meaningful slice of teams, not a nice-to-have, and that brings the final score to Claude 2, MiniMax 2, 1 tied, so now we can actually talk about what that means for your decision. Claude wins on raw coding quality at 72.9% SWE bench versus 68.4%, on output length with 64,000 tokens per response versus 32,000, on community consensus for natural production-ready code, and on deployment reach with Vertex AI support that MiniMax simply doesn't have. MiniMax wins on price by a wide margin, 10 times cheaper on input and 12.5 times cheaper on output, on context window at 1 million tokens versus 200,000 for whole repo work, and on claimed output speed at 105 tokens per second for high-volume pipelines where throughput actually matters. If you need peak reasoning for the hardest problems or you're locked into Google Cloud, pick Claude. If you're running volume work where cost per task is the real bottleneck, MiniMax M2 is your default pick. 10 to 12.5 times cheaper is the number, and for most coding agents, that gap wins. One thing the docs don't flag up front, MiniMax M2's max output cap is 32,000 tokens, and if your coding agent is generating long scaffolded files or multi-file diffs in a single response, you'll silently hit that ceiling and get a truncated output with no obvious error, which can corrupt downstream pipeline steps before you even notice. If the cost angle here got you thinking about other model matchups, I ran the same kind of breakdown on DeepSeek R1 versus ChatGPT, which is cheaper, and the price gap there is honestly just as wild. That video is up next, and it's worth a look if you're trying to figure out where to put your API budget.